If you have ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you may have noticed something deeply unsettling. They leave, but the feeling of them does not disappear. There is no clear goodbye, no real sense of closure that allows you to grieve and move forward. Instead, there is a cold, ambiguous silence, just enough to make you question where you went wrong, and whether it ever truly ended at all. Then, at another moment when you begin to steady yourself, when you stop chasing, stop waiting, stop organizing your life around their absence, they return. Sometimes it is just a short message, a seemingly harmless check-in. But your body reacts before your mind does. Your chest tightens, your thoughts are pulled straight back into the past. And it is in that exact moment that many people fall again. Because their return is not love, and it is not a delayed awakening. It is the old cycle trying to reopen its door. If you allow them back into your life, you are not starting over, you are returning to the very place that once drained you the most. And in today's video, we will explore why narcissists always return after a breakup, and why closing that door is an act of self-protection, not selfishness. And to understand why the moment they return can destabilize you so deeply, we must pause the self-blame and look directly at the structure beneath the reaction. This is not a story of weak emotions, but a three-layer map quietly pulling you back onto a pre-installed track. Layer 1. The nervous system. When the body craves signals after tension relief cycles, the first truth is this: your reaction does not begin with choice, it begins with your nervous system. In narcissistic relationships, the brain is often conditioned through what psychology calls intermittent reinforcement. This is the same mechanism that makes gambling more addictive than consistent rewards. When attention, affection, and validation are given and withdrawn unpredictably, the brain does not learn to let go, it learns to wait. Behavioral psychology research shows that unstable reward patterns generate higher dopamine spikes than secure, consistent bonds. The attachment forms not around happiness, but around hope. The hope that this time will be different. When they disappear, your nervous system is not just grieving, it is deprived of signals. And when a message appears again, even a small one, the body reacts like someone who has been holding their breath and is finally allowed to inhale. This is why people report tight chests, shaking hands, or mental blankness when they see the narcissist return. Not because love remains, but because the nervous system memorized that rhythm as emotional survival. Trauma bond research confirms that the body prefers familiar danger over unfamiliar safety. It chooses what it knows. Layer 2. Cognition. The mind hates unfinished endings and writes answers for them. But biology alone would not keep you trapped this long. The second layer is cognitive. The human mind hates unfinished loops. Psychology refers to this as the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished stories occupy more mental space than closed ones. Narcissistic breakups rarely provide closure. They leave gaps. No explanation, no apology, no ending, and the mind fills the gap. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe if I had handled it better, they wouldn't have left. These thoughts do not come from truth. They come from the brain's attempt to reduce uncertainty. Studies on gaslighting show that prolonged ambiguity pushes people to doubt themselves to regain a sense of control. When the narcissist returns, the mind interprets it as a chance to finally complete the story, not because they changed, but because the loop never closed. Layer 3. Identity. Being pulled back into the role of the healer. The deepest layer is identity. In narcissistic dynamics, you were not valued as a whole person. You were kept for a function, the understanding one, the soothing one, the one who stayed. Over time, this role fused with how you saw yourself. Attachment research shows that highly empathic individuals often tie self-worth to their ability to stabilize others. When the narcissist returns, part of you does not see danger, it sees a chance to repair, to heal, to finally get it right. Not because you are naive, but because your identity was shaped around emotional survival. And here is the crucial truth: you are not weak, you are not lacking discipline. You are responding exactly as someone conditioned across biology, cognition, and identity would respond. When you see this clearly, the question shifts from, "Why am I like this?" to, "What mechanism is operating and how do I step off the track?" And that is where freedom begins. And once you understand why their return can destabilize you so deeply, the next step is to look directly at the motive behind that return, not through emotion, but through structure. Here is the core truth. When a narcissist returns, they are not coming back to build something new. They return to restore a system that once regulated their ego efficiently. In personality psychology, this is not attachment or remorse, it is maintenance. 3 repair targets almost always appear, regardless of how gentle their words sound. First, they fix supply. Second, they fix power. Third, they fix the story. Fixing supply, reclaiming emotional fuel. Clinical research on narcissistic traits describes narcissistic supply as the attention, validation, and emotional reactions that stabilize the ego. When supply is abruptly interrupted, studies show a sharp rise in subjective distress and emotional dysregulation, agitation, irritability, short depressive episodes, and compulsive seeking behaviors. You were a reliable supply, responsive, soothing, reactive. When they left, they assumed another source would replace you quickly, but new supply rarely matches immediately. When the replacement fails, a supply shock occurs. The return is compensation, not longing for you, but a need for fuel. Crucially, they do not need love, they need reaction. Social reward research shows that emotional responses, even negative ones, still activate reward circuitry. A harmless message is often just a pressure test. Fixing power, filling the control vacuum created by your silence. The second repair is power. Over time, the narcissist built a prediction map of you, what makes you explain, soften, panic. That map created a sense of control, often described by psychoanalysts as ego oxygen. When you go truly silent, the map fails. No data, no signals. Research on emotional regulation and polyvagal theory shows that losing predictive control triggers threat responses in those with poor self-regulation. The return becomes a power check to see if they can still influence you. This explains the subtle probes, viewing stories, light reactions, vague check-ins. The goal is measurement, not reunion. Fixing the story. Healing ego injury by rewriting the ending. The third repair is narrative. Narcissists struggle not with endings, but with endings they did not author. Researchers describe this as ego injury. To soothe it, they seek a redemption fantasy, returning to reclaim centrality and rewrite the ending as a win. The return is not about repairing what broke between you. It is about repairing how the story is remembered. If they can elicit hesitation or reaction, the narrative shifts from "I was left" to "I still have power." Studies on autobiographical memory in narcissistic traits show a strong tendency to reconstruct memory to preserve self-image. Name it clearly. This is maintenance, not love. Love builds safety and growth. Maintenance keeps the old machine running. Letting them back is not a new chapter, it is flipping the switch back on. Once you see this, the question changes from "Have they changed?" to "Am I willing to service a system that once depleted me?" And that answer determines whether you move forward or loop back. And once you realize that their return is not about repairing the relationship, but about restoring a familiar system, the next thing you must see clearly is how they re-enter you. Narcissists do not come back randomly, nor do they act on impulse. They operate using a precise infiltration map made up of 5 unlocking moves applied in sequence. Each move is designed to trigger a specific reflex formed during the previous relationship, from harmless-looking signals, carefully curated memories, and a calculated victim role, to pseudo-healing language, and finally, emotional pressure meant to force a reaction. These 5 unlocking moves do not exist separately. They work together, escalating in intensity, and only stop when one door inside you opens. If you cannot identify which unlocking move is being used, you are not choosing to return. You are being pulled back by a pre-installed psychological momentum. Unlock. Move 1. The harmless bait. Just a tiny signal. A narcissist almost always returns with the smallest possible signal, because they do not need to convince you to come back immediately. They only need to test whether the door is still open. A one-word text, a single emoji, a casual, "How are you?" The content is deliberately unimportant. What matters is the reappearance itself. That harmlessness is the perfect disguise. If you respond, they gain data. If you don't, they can still claim, "I was just checking in." The brain reflex triggered here is not love, it is the orienting response. Your nervous system automatically turns toward a familiar signal as a survival mechanism. And because the relationship was often built on an unpredictable tension relief rhythm, your brain learned that a small signal could lead to a big emotional outcome, either a temporary return of love or a new wave of coldness. Dopamine does not only spike when you receive a reward, it spikes even more when you anticipate one. So the harmless bait is actually an expectation switch. Before you can think, "Should I reply?" your body tightens, your heart drops, your mind starts running. The cost of replying is simple. You confirm the line still works. Even a polite reply, a cold reply, or a single icon tells their system the button is still active. And once they know that, the next move arrives quickly because they did not return to talk. They return to test access to your nervous system. Unlock. Move 2. Nostalgia, striking the selective memory. If the harmless bait tests the connection, nostalgia injects emotional fuel into that connection. They bring up a song, a place, an inside joke, a shared memory, an old photo, anything that bypasses logic and touches attachment. This is where the brain is vulnerable. Memory is not a camera recording the truth, it is a reconstruction. When you are exhausted from pain, the mind seeks soft refuge, beautiful moments, sweet fragments, rare tenderness. Narcissists understand this well. They rarely say, "I miss you." They say, "I heard that song and thought of you," or "I walked past that place," or "I remembered your laugh." It sounds accidental, but it is a needle. The reflex triggered is rebonding. Your body remembers belonging before it remembers why you had to leave. Nostalgia also creates a dangerous contrast. Your present recovery can suddenly feel dry, while the past, though painful, feels colored. The cost is that you get pulled out of your current reality and back into an old inner room where you once hoped, waited, and explained. They do not need you to forget the pain. They only need you to soften enough to hesitate. Hesitation is the crack, and to them, a crack is enough. Unlock. Move 3. The victim card, weaponized vulnerability. When sweet memories do not open the door wide enough, they switch. Not, "We were good, but I am not okay." Illness, crisis, loneliness, being betrayed by others, or a drained voice, "I'm struggling." This is where many kind people fall, not because they are weak, but because they do not want to feel cruel. But you must see this clearly. The victim card is not simply fragility, it is a power configuration. When they place themselves low, they pull you into the high role, the rescuer, the understanding one, the one who shouldn't abandon them now. Once you step into that role, the power balance shifts instantly. The system restarts without any official reconciliation. The reflex triggered is automatic empathy and responsibility, especially strong in people who carried emotional responsibility in the relationship. For anxious attachment or high responsibility personalities, distress signals activate an inner command. I can't leave them. The cost is that you volunteer to return to the role that once drained you. You start checking in, soothing, holding space, making exceptions, just this once. You believe it's compassion, but in this structure, compassion is not received as love, it is received as access. They may not need you to return publicly, they only need your energy to return, and the moment you hold them again, you abandon yourself again. Unlock. Move 4. Fake growth, healing language as camouflage. This is the most sophisticated move because it targets the most evolved part of you, your belief that people can change. They use the exact recovery vocabulary you once dreamed of hearing. I realized, I'm in therapy, I understand my attachment, I'm healing, I want to do it right. It sounds like maturity, but you must read structure, not language. Healing language can be learned as a script. And narcissists often learn fastest what makes you soften. The reflex triggered is conditional hope. This time is different because they sound different. Once hope rises, your brain lowers defenses and opens a door for reinvestment. The cost is that you bet your future on words instead of evidence. Real change requires time, consistency, long-term accountability, not a deep conversation or a well-written apology. But fake growth pulls you into a silent contract. I'll wait and see. And the moment you wait, you restore their central position. While you wait, they return. While they return, your nervous system reactivates. While you reactivate, you start adjusting your life around them again. That is how the cycle returns without needing to say, we're back together. Unlock. Move 5. Pressure, anger, blame, and emotional debt. If the first 4 moves are soft, the last one is hard. It appears when you do not respond as they want. Now they drop the polite mask and apply pressure, accusations, sarcasm, character attacks, emotional debt, fairness claims, rewritten history. You're always like this. After everything I did, you're selfish. You make me the villain. This targets a deep trap in good people, the need to be understood correctly. You want to explain, correct, defend the truth, prove you're not the bad one. And in that moment, you step back onto the old battlefield where they know the terrain better than you. The reflex triggered is ego defense. When identity is threatened, the brain rushes into reaction. But for narcissists, your explanations are not information, they are fuel. The more you clarify, the more they confuse. The more you seek closure, the more they stretch it. Because the goal is not truth, the goal is activation. The cost is that you reopen the old war, a war of exhaustion. You lose sleep, you rehearse responses, you live inside imaginary debates. You think you're protecting reality, but you're being pulled out of your life to perform in their play again. The key point is this: these 5 moves are not random. They operate as an ordered infiltration sequence, escalating and stopping the moment one move works. If the harmless bait fails, they shift to nostalgia. If nostalgia fails, they shift to the victim card. If that fails, they deploy fake growth. And if nothing works, pressure arrives to force a reaction. Once you see it as an attack map, it becomes clear. Their return is not an invitation to love. It is a technical attempt to regain access. And the moment you stop reacting, not because you are cold, but because you are awake, the game ends. Not because they improved, but because you are no longer a surface they can unlock. No lock, no entry. That is real freedom. Not arguing to win, not explaining to be understood, simply removing the door. And once you see how they return, once you recognize the infiltration map and the sequence of techniques they use to reopen old doors inside you, the most important question is no longer, what will they do next? But what will inevitably repeat if I go back? Because with a narcissist, there is no such thing as starting over. There is only returning to the same cycle at a higher intensity. And this is why there are 4 traps you must see clearly, not to scare yourself, but to stop deceiving yourself. Trap 1. Paying with self-respect, you confirm their right to enter and exit your life. The first time they left, it was ambiguous. When you let them back, the first thing you lose is not peace, it is your boundary. You send a powerful message without saying a word. Even after leaving like that, even after hurting me, you can still come back. To a narcissist, this is not forgiveness, it is power confirmation. They do not listen to your pain narrative. They read behavior, and returning tells them the door can close, but it is never locked. From that moment, the structure resets with you lower and them higher. You are no longer chosen. You are accessible. self-respect does not vanish instantly, it leaks. You adjust yourself to not make things worse. You become more careful, more tolerant, more self-blaming. Each time you swallow unfairness to keep peace, you pay more self-respect for the privilege of being back. Eventually, you stop asking, "Do I deserve this?" and start asking, "How do I not lose them again?" That is the first trap. Trap 2. Addiction to being explained. Dialogue becomes a maze. Many people return not because they believe the narcissist changed, but because they crave something deeply human, to be understood correctly, to be validated, to hear, "You're not crazy." This is where narcissists are strongest. They do not return to listen. They return to trap you in endless dialogue. Every explanation is twisted. Every fact is countered with feelings. Every "this hurt me" becomes "you're too sensitive." The brain hates unfinished stories, so dialogue becomes a task to complete. You think, if I just explain one more time, they'll understand. But narcissistic dialogue is a maze. Rules change midway. Standards shift. You feel close to resolution but never reach it. The addiction here is not to them, it is to the promise of being understood. The cost is your time, energy, and clarity. The more you explain, the more you lose yourself. Trap 3. Nervous system reconditioning. A stronger reward-punishment loop. The return does not just reset the relationship, it resets your nervous system at a deeper level. The first time, you learn to wait, to read tone, to tense in silence and relax with attention. The second time, your brain already has the tracks. The reward-punishment loop becomes faster, stronger, more addictive. Intermittent care creates larger dopamine spikes. Relief after pain feels more intense, making the suffering feel worth it. Research on conditioning shows unpredictable rewards create the strongest attachment. Narcissists often operate exactly this way. The second exit is harder not because you are weaker, but because your nervous system has been trained deeper. Trap 4. Being locked into the old role, the fixer, the holder, the waiter. When you return, the old roles reactivate automatically. You become the one who fixes, endures, waits. They become the center again. This is dangerous because it erases who you've become. The version of you with boundaries, growth, clarity is not allowed into the system. Every boundary triggers withdrawal or blame until you shrink again to keep peace. You are not just returning to them, you are returning to an old identity. And leaving again means leaving not only a person, but a familiar self. Here is the cold truth you must hold. The return is not round 2, it is round 1, upgraded. Everything repeats faster, sharper, more costly. Not because they are worse, but because the system has learned how to operate more efficiently on you. Returning does not open a new chapter. It reopens the same one with smaller print for you and bolder print for them. Understanding this is not about hating them, it is about stopping the sacrifice of yourself to a cycle that has already proven what it is. Not going back is not selfish, it is the only action that breaks the trap at its root. And after you have clearly seen the traps that will inevitably repeat if you go back, a very natural question arises for many people. But what if this time they are truly different? That question is not naive, it is deeply human. And precisely because of that, it should not be answered with emotion or hope, but with the only thing that has real value in a relationship with a narcissist: behavior under loss of power. Not words, not feelings, not promises, but behavior when they no longer control access to you. This is where the 3 thresholds come in, 3 highly practical markers that tell you whether their return is about love or merely an attempt to reset the system. The first threshold. Accountability. Do they take specific responsibility without deflecting blame? Real love is inseparable from accountability. Not vague apologies like, "I'm sorry I hurt you," but the ability to name specific actions, specific harm, and personal responsibility without dilution. A genuine acknowledgement sounds like, "I disappeared without explaining. That left you confused and doubting yourself. That was unfair, and I take responsibility for it." A narcissist returning to test power rarely does this. They may apologize, but the apology is usually conditional or contaminated with justification. I'm sorry, but I was under a lot of stress. You also played a part. If you had understood me more. This is not accountability. It is responsibility dilution. The core question of this threshold is simple. Can they stand alone with their wrongdoing? Or do they need you to carry part of it for them? If they cannot pass this threshold, the return is not love. It is an attempt to soothe the ego and escape the discomfort of being the one who caused harm. The second threshold, consequences. Can they accept boundaries and loss of access? Real love respects boundaries, even when those boundaries are uncomfortable. Someone returning out of love understands that they no longer have default access to you, no right to message whenever they want, no entitlement to emotional intimacy, no expectation of reassurance, no demand for immediate responses. And most importantly, they accept this without resentment, without testing, without pushing. A narcissist returning to reclaim power reacts very differently. They may initially appear understanding, but soon they begin to test limits. Texting a little more often, asking slightly intrusive questions, accidentally crossing boundaries, then carefully observing your response. When boundaries hold, they shift to emotional tactics, sadness, guilt, irritation, or victimhood. This reveals a critical truth. They are not distressed by losing you, they are distressed by losing control. The second threshold measures one thing only. Can they tolerate a relationship where they do not dominate your emotional space? If they cannot endure asking instead of taking, then they are not returning to love, they are returning to reclaim position. The third threshold, consistency. Do their changes remain stable over time? This is the threshold most people skip, because it demands the hardest thing of all, time without urgency. Narcissists are exceptionally good at short-term change. They can be attentive for weeks, even months, especially when the threat of losing you is fresh. But real change is not measured during emotional intensity, it is measured during normalcy. This threshold does not ask, are they better today? It asks, do they remain stable when there is no immediate risk of losing you? It looks for consistency in small things, keeping minor promises, not disappearing during discomfort, not using silence as punishment, not reversing roles when confronted. Authentic change is slow, quiet, and often unremarkable. If you see grand declarations, emotional highs, and dramatic insight without long-term behavioral stability across months, not days, you are not witnessing transformation, you are witnessing impression management. And impression management has one purpose, pulling you back into the old system. These three thresholds are not meant to test them. They exist to protect you. You do not need to announce them. You do not need to demand they pass them. You only need to observe. Someone returning out of love will naturally pass these thresholds without persuasion. Someone returning to reset the system will react defensively at the first, resist the second, and never reach the third. And here is the truth you must hold firmly. If they do not pass all three thresholds, this is not a second chance. It is a failed power check, and you simply saw it earlier this time. Understanding these thresholds frees you from the haunting question, am I being too harsh? No, you are not harsh. You have simply stopped measuring love by words. You now measure it by accountability, tolerance of consequence, and consistency over time. And when you stand here, something quietly shifts. You no longer need to decide whether to go back or not. The decision reveals itself through their behavior. And that is the moment real power leaves their hands, not because you won, but because you stopped participating in the test at all. Once you clearly understand why they return, recognize the intrusion tactics, and measure their intent through behavioral thresholds, the only remaining question is no longer, what will they do next? But what do I do so I don't get pulled back in? What you need now is not more insight, but a concrete exit plan designed to protect you at your weakest moments. This plan is not built on emotional willpower, but on a very practical principle, revoking their access to you, across three layers: nervous system, cognition, and behavior. Layer 1, The nervous system cut activation before the mind starts negotiating. Most people don't fail because they don't understand. They fail because their body reacts faster than their thoughts. When a narcissist reaches out, appears, or even leaves a small signal, your nervous system activates instantly. Racing heart, tight chest, mental fog, compulsive checking. This isn't weakness. It's biological conditioning from repeated reward-punishment cycles. Reducing activation means removing the channel, not debating the content. Muting or blocking isn't avoidance, it's preventing access to your nervous system. Sleep, regular meals, and gentle movement are not self-care cliches here. They are biological defense strategies. Research on emotional regulation shows that a dysregulated nervous system fuels obsessive thinking and poor decisions. When depleted, the brain seeks familiar relief, and the past becomes a false refuge. Layer 2. Cognition. Change the question to exit the maze. Once activation lowers, the mind begins asking questions. This is where many relapse. The familiar question is, do they love me? Or what if this time is different? These questions trap you in their perspective. The exit plan requires a precise cognitive shift. Change the question. Replace it with, what do they need from my reaction? This instantly shifts the analytical axis. You stop decoding their emotions and start observing the function of their behavior. Attention, validation, reassurance, guilt, relief. When behavior is viewed functionally rather than romantically, emotional intensity drops sharply. Studies on psychological manipulation show that reframing questions reduces emotional hijacking because the brain exits the role of the chosen one and enters the role of the observer. Layer 3. Behavior disciplined silence through the 3NO rule. This is the hardest layer, not because it's unclear, but because it contradicts social instinct. The 3NO rule is simple. No arguing, no explaining, no correcting. Narcissists don't need agreement, they need reaction. Every explanation is a new thread. Every attempt to clarify reactivates the system. No arguing, because arguments become labyrinths. No explaining, because they aren't seeking understanding. No correcting, because truth isn't the goal, control is. What matters is having a pre-written script for contact attempts, so you don't improvise while emotionally vulnerable. The exit plan doesn't require politeness. It requires consistency. The essence of these 3 layers is a cold but liberating truth. You don't need to close your heart, you need to revoke access. When they can no longer reach your nervous system, steer your thinking, or provoke your behavior, the game ends not because they improved, but because you are no longer operable terrain. And that is where real freedom begins quietly, steadily, and irreversibly. If there is one truth to anchor after everything explored in this journey, it is this: you are not in a competition. You do not need to prove you were right. You do not need to make them regret anything. And you certainly do not need to win against a narcissist. From the very beginning, the game was never designed for you to win. It was designed to keep you orbiting them. When a narcissist returns after a breakup, the real danger is not what they say, but what awakens inside you. Vague hope, familiar compassion, the quiet thought, maybe this time is different. But now you see the structure beneath the return. This is not love coming back. It is an old system trying to reboot. They return to retrieve the old version of you, the one who reacted, explained, waited, repaired. And if you maintain true silence, you are doing something entirely different. You are giving birth to a new version of yourself. For those who have already left, the advice is not be stronger, but be consistent. Consistent with boundaries, consistent with revoked access, consistent with the truth that every reopened door does not reset the relationship, it restarts it at the point where you were most depleted. With a stronger loop, for those in the process of leaving, understand this. The discomfort, restlessness, and emptiness that arise in silence are not signs you are wrong. They are signs your brain is detoxing from a conditioned emotional rhythm. Research on attachment and addiction consistently shows that when an emotional stimulus is removed, the nervous system reacts like withdrawal. This says nothing about the value of the relationship. It only reveals the depth of conditioning. If you pass through this phase without betraying yourself, your nervous system learns a new rhythm, one of calm. For those about to enter a relationship and noticing narcissistic traits, the guidance is not run immediately, but observe behavior, not language. Don't ask who they say they are. Watch how they handle responsibility, boundaries, and consistency over time. Narcissism doesn't reveal itself in promises, it reveals itself in reactions to frustration. If you find yourself quickly cast as the fixer, the empath, the one who waits, that is not love unfolding. That is a system being installed. True freedom in these dynamics does not come from being chosen again. It comes from the moment you are no longer available to be chosen. You do not need to defeat them. You simply need not to enter. Not the argument, not the explanation, not the old loop. When you don't enter, their power ends there. Remember this liberating line. They return to reclaim your old self. You stay silent to create a new one. And if you are in the hardest stage of silence, when everything in you wants to respond just to ease the discomfort, remember, discomfort is not failure. Discomfort is detox. And on the other side of detox is not emptiness, but space for a life no longer shaped by someone else's absence.